Thank you, Athena. I remember when I first called you, looking for you in Paris to ask you if you wanted to come to see us in Delos. I was very stressed. I said, with this lady, with those big title and doing so much amazing work. Now we are friends, and it's wonderful to have you next to us. Thank you very much. We are moving now to the second panel. This time we found some chairs, so you guys are more lucky. We'll have 4 chairs here. I'll hand over to Daniel Barber from the Technical University of Eindhoven. Daniel was with us last year, but we decided that we wanted him back and he wanted to come back. And now he will moderate the next panel, which will bring us down to Earth. And this is really about One Health, planetary health, human health. You heard some beautiful things yesterday by Mr. Sarianis, but unfortunately it was in Greek. So for most of you, maybe it wasn't so wonderful as it was for us. But now I'm handing over to Daniel, and I hope you will enjoy this second conversation. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Such a pleasure to be here, to be back in this beautiful place. Thanks also, Valentina, Mirto, and Joanna for all of the amazing support that you provide and allowing us all to be here. Can maybe the panelists already come and join me at the stage here at the proscenium? So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Daniel Barber. I'm a professor of architecture and chair of the working group on architectural history and decarbonization at the Technical University of Eindhoven. And we're going to talk today about some questions as a sort of subset of the pulse of life, the way that water and fluids flow from sort of bodies and minds, ecosystems and planets. We are born into this world and, reflecting the preciousness of life, and that was a cliche indeed, but a powerful one all the same. Born into this world needing a family, a community, and a planet, right? Something to support us, a lot of things to support us, soul and body. And health, the pulse of life, sort of operates in this transversal fashion, I'm going to propose, from the soul, from the self, right, to the kind of social bodies that we engage, and then into the ecosystems that surround us, right? So what we're going to be talking through a little bit today is that sort of transversal line, that connects our internal systems to the systems of the planet, thinking about fluids and waters as a kind of through line or as a system that operates across these different planes, across these different registers. I have the great pleasure, I'm really here just to sort of say hello and introduce these fabulous panelists. They will each, actually are sitting almost, no, not quite in order, but that's okay. They will each give a brief and compelling presentation, and then we're really hoping that we have some time at the end to open up to some discussions from you, so feel free to pull your notebooks out of your bags and take a few notes or jot down a few ideas as we go along. You'll forgive me to look at my own notes to make sure I introduce everybody correctly. Oh, just one other thought that I had is, from the past panel that I think is directly relevant to what we're doing here in our discussion, this question that almost came up of sort of spaceship Earth as a kind of term that, that emerged in the 60s through Barbara Ward and R. Buckminster Fuller. The ways in which we kind of think of our ecosystems and economies as having an impact is not quite being closed systems, but certainly being sort of desperately interrelated, right? I mean, so confined and entangled that any action, any small action that we might take internally has an effect, again, on the self, on the social systems that we depend on the planetary ecosystems that allow us to thrive. Okay, so I'll introduce them in order, and then we'll just sort of go through one by one. And you'll forgive me, these introductions are quite quick, but I know we can all Google and look further. Niki Evelpidou, I hope that's pretty good, okay. Yeah, is a professor at the Department of Geology and Geoenvironment at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. After Niki, we'll hear from Jadvinder Malhi, professor of ecosystem science at the University of Oxford, and then close with Jacob Moe, sitting in the middle, filmmaker, archivist, and translator, and founder of the Archipelago Network. So I pass the word to Niki. Thank you all.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Many thanks to Mrs. Alexandra Mitsotakis, who invited me here to be with you today. It's a great honor and also a pleasure to meet you all. As a geologist, I will speak about the Earth. In fact, the place we are standing today has faced many, many changes. Climate itself is changing all the time. Anyway, by physical, it is natural. We had many glacial and interglacial periods throughout the history of the Earth. It is natural. And the last interglacial period we are still living in started around 12,000 years ago. And at the beginning of this period, the sea was 120 meters below the current one. Can you imagine all these islands around us? Andros, Tinos, Delos, Mykonos, Syros, Paros, Naxos, Ios, Sikinos, Folegandros, the small Cyclades were all combined into one island. We wouldn't have need a boat to come here today. We could come by road. So, if it is a natural process, why is all this argument about what we, the human beings, are doing related to the climate? The answer is that we are accelerating the rise of the temperature. We are accelerating the natural process. And this acceleration is so fast that now we speak about climate crisis, because it is so fast that we are not sure if we have enough time to adapt with, to deal with this challenge. Just to give you an idea, during the whole interglacial period, the temperature was rising, but every 1,000 of years, we have 1 degree rise. While in my short lifetime, we have already 1 degree rise of the temperature. That makes a rate 20 times faster. 20 times faster. The ecosystem and the species cannot evolve, cannot adapt so fast. So we have biodiversity loss. At this point, I would like to refer to the words of Kimberly Nicholas, who wrote the book, Under the Sky We Make. I find it very inspiring because in only 12 words, she has summarized the knowledge we have about climate. And she says, it is warming. It is us. We are sure. It is bad. We can fix it. And it is us because we emit greenhouse gases. And let's imagine the greenhouse effect as a transparent blanket that the light may go through, but the heat cannot. So the heat gets trapped in there. And I will focus in one of the greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide, because it is really, really important. And it is really, really important because when carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, it needs a long time to go down. And when a geologist says long time, geologists mean it. It's about 200,000 years to go down. Now you may think, okay, Niki, but we had carbon dioxide emissions anyway through natural processes. For example, volcanoes are erupting during the whole for millions and billions of years, and when they erupt, they release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And this is true, and still the carbon dioxide maintain for a long time period a climate stable enough to allow complex life to exist. and this is not by chance. There is a parallel process which includes plate tectonics and weathering. Plate tectonics creates big masses of mountains like Himalaya and the Andes. And when we have big mountains, then the weathering process starts. And in the core of this process, there is a rock all around us, the granodiorite and granite. You know, granite is formed deep inside the earth. This is its comfort zone. But when granite comes at the earth's surface, does not feel very comfortable. It needs to find its new balance. And in order to do this is happening through the weathering, and the unstable minerals, like the silicate minerals of granite, are altering into kaolinite, which is stable at the Earth's surface. But this process consumes a lot of carbon dioxide. So what's the change now? The difference is that we emit faster than the weathering of the rocks can reduce the carbonate that we emit. So we have the global warming, and it is bad. One of the reasons it is bad is the sea level acceleration. Based on the most optimistic scenario, until the end of the century, we will have a 40 centimeter sea level rise. And under the less optimistic scenario, it will be at least 80 centimeter sea level rise. In practical terms, this means that by 2050, we will lose the 1/3 of the beaches. 2050, it's less than 25 years. And this percentage becomes 60% by the end of the century. And we have also to mention that at least 500 people live in low-lying coastal areas, 500 people per square kilometer, which means that it will create also serious socioeconomic problems. And cultural sites like Delos and other sites all around are at risk. They will be submerged. They will be under the sea. But this is not the worst scenario. There is much, much worse than that. Because when sea level rises, the sea bottom becomes deeper. And when sea bottom becomes deeper, the waves have a different energy than the one we know nowadays. It will be different. The morphodynamics change, which means we will have bigger waves, stronger waves approaching the coastline, and they will produce erosion. The cultural sites will first be destroyed, they will be damaged, and after that, the remains of them will be submerged under the sea level. Do we have solutions? Yes, we do. There are 3 solutions for climate crisis. First of all, we reduce emissions. Secondly, it involves nature-based solutions. And the third thing, we remove carbon dioxide. We need to get to net zero. We have to stop changing the chemistry of our atmosphere. This means that if we emit, then we have to find a way to remove. And we need all the 3 solutions, and we need them at the same time. How to do that? First of all, we need to step a little bit out of our comfort zone. Then we need to think out of the box. And we need to listen to nature. The nature is speaking. It gives us examples. And I will share with you one of the examples that nature is giving in order to protect the coastal zones. Nature is producing beach rocks, which is, let's say, a way to fossilize a beach. It becomes cemented by a natural way. And these beach rocks, in many cases, are under the sea. And they act as a reef protecting the coastal zone because the wave energy crashes onto this reef and arrives with reduced energy to our coastline. And in fact, we have this kind of formations also here in Delos and in Mykonos. If you swim around, you may notice. And after 20 years of research, we can apply reverse engineering, we can mimic what nature is doing, and we can create artificially triggered but naturally developed reefs in situ without bringing any foreign materials, using only what the local sea bottom has. And this technology protects the coastline, enhance the biodiversity, reduce the use of cement, which a material with a high carbon footprint, and also it removes carbon dioxide from the environment. And in fact, for protecting 1 kilometer of our coastline, it is an offset of it is an annual offset of 750 cars, which is amazing. We just follow what nature is doing. And now I will finish with I would like to describe a picture taken by an anonymous photographer. This picture shows a man standing in the beach and looking towards the sea. Beside him, there is a woman, and next, there are 3 children. One of them is Polina. Further away is a boy fishing among the rocks. In the picture, there is something wrong. We shouldn't be able to see the rocks. And in the horizon, there is a tsunami. Three minutes after this photo was taken, the tsunami hit the coastal zone, this beach of Thailand, with a height of 17.4 meters. It was December 26, 2004, 10:27 in the morning in Thailand. The tsunami crossed the Indian Ocean and killed more than 200,000 people. One of them was Polina. Now you may ask yourself, why this man was just watching the sea while the tsunami was coming and his kids were playing? Because from that far away, the tsunami did not look that big. Did not look at all that big. But the evidence were there. Just in the same way we have nowadays the evidence. We have the heat waves, we have the flash floods, the extreme events, the biodiversity loss, the sea level rise. And what the humanity is doing, just watching the climate crisis approaching. It is our moment. It is our 3 minutes. Based on what we are doing in these 3 minutes, It is the result of our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Niki. If you could pass the microphone to Yadvinder. I appreciated both the precision and the clarity of your presentation, also some hope in there. So thank you very much for that. Yadvinder, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll stand up. Okay, good evening, good afternoon, kalispera. I would like to start by asking you to do something a little unusual, or inviting you at least, which is to raise your hands and lick the back of your hand. Go on. What do you taste? What are you tasting there? Salt, yeah, especially this heat, I think there's probably a bit of salt there. And the salt, I certainly feel taste it. And that salt is largely from our sweat on this hot day. And maybe on the boat crossing, we picked up a bit of sea spray from the water. On a windier day, we'd pick up more. And maybe it's a mix of both of those in what we're tasting there. And it can be hard to know where our bodies end and the sea begins. And there's a reason for that. And as we heard in the first session, our ancestors evolved in the ocean. Our biochemistry, our biology is the biology evolved in the sea. Sodium in salt is essential for our nervous system, to power our nervous system, to power the membranes of our cells. We have the biology of the ocean carried within us, echoes within us. So we are animal bodies of salt and water, and we are intimately connected to the great bodies of salt and water of the entire planet. So when we think about health, about human health and planetary health, we can look at the intersections between the two. But perhaps the most profound realization is that our health emerges from the health of this great metabolism that is our planet. We've emerged from that. The biology of that metabolism is the biology of humans and of all other creatures on this planet. And so we live inside something huge, dynamic, immense, alive and vibrant. Now, ecosystem scientists like me may call this huge thing the sum of all the world's ecosystems and call it the biosphere. Others may choose to call it a planetary machine. Others like to personify the intensity that personality gives it and give it other names like Gaia or Pachamama or Earth Mother. But whatever we choose to call it, the most important thing is to be aware that it is there and be acutely aware of that. And in our societies full of human relationships and technologies, we can sometimes forget that we're entirely embedded in this huge, living, ancient entity that is our biosphere, our Pachamama, our Gaia. Now, there are many ways of describing the story, the metabolism of this biosphere. We could talk about carbon or nutrients or energy, but fitting the theme of today, I'm going to pick the path of water, the way of water, and tell you a few stories of the way of water. As we heard, life emerged on land around 400 million years ago, and before that, the land, the granite surfaces that we were on, were a little bit like the rocks on Mount Kintos. If you go up there, barren. When rain fell, but little water came from the ocean, was washed onto that land. It soaked quickly into the lifeless soil, into groundwater, and ran out back to the sea. But when plants emerged on land, they formed an alliance with fungi, and they created something special and new, living soil, made from their own dead bodies, their material. And that soil acted like a sponge that holds water. You can see patches of it here all around us. And then the roots and the fungal hyphae penetrate that soil. And when the rain fell, the water came back up through the leaves of the plants and back to the atmosphere. And so the plants began to humidify the atmosphere of the land surface to create a wetter climate. And so in the case of arid regions like here in the Aegean, that effect is relatively small. But if we go to the great wet regions of our planet, that effect is immense and immensely important. For much of my career, I have studied these great wet regions of the tropics. So let's go to one of them now. So if you go roughly in that direction, out over North Africa, over the Atlantic, we would reach the Amazon rainforest. So when you allow for the curvature, it's probably more like here, down there. And the great home of half of the biodiversity on Earth. And there the Amazon is washed in by trade winds from the Atlantic that carry moisture. That moisture forms clouds that fall as rain in the eastern Amazon. And then the trees do their great suction, pull up the rain from the water up through their leaves back to the atmosphere, where it condenses to form clouds. And a little bit further west, the water falls as rain again, and again, and again. And this cycle repeats 4 or 5 times, crossing the Amazon, forming a river in the sky that matches the river on ground, which is the Amazon River, but flowing in the other direction. And when it hits the wall of the Andes, that river turns southwards and goes out over the drier regions of South America to southern Brazil, northern Argentina, where it waters and the great agricultural breadbaskets of South America. And if that river falters, as it's beginning to do, as the Amazon is slowly eaten away and this lush forest is turned into cattle ranch or agro-industrial crops, that river begins to falter and the food supply of South America begins to falter. Now let's go to another region. In about a week from now, I hope to be in the heart of the Congo rainforest, which is roughly around here. So let's go this way, due south, over Egypt and further down to the Congo. And there we're doing similar research, but in a system that's far less understood. The Congo is thought to be peripheral, remote to the concerns of the earth, the heart of darkness, somewhere remote and marginal to the world. But in fact, it's the great green heart of Africa. It cycles water and moisture, and that water splashes out over Africa, watering that dry continent. Part of that water heads northeastwards towards the arid lands of Ethiopia, where it has nourished an ancient civilization, and then it flows down to form the Blue Nile that comes down into the Great Nile, which is nourishing another ancient civilization and on which hundreds of millions of people depend. And then that water comes out into the Mediterranean, mixes with the waters of the Mediterranean, and is part of the water that we've crossed today in the Aegean. And then some of it evaporates up and forms the dew that caresses the plants and rocks of Delos. So some of the air you're breathing, that moisture you're breathing now, a few months ago was a leaf in the Congo rainforest. So there's this huge interbreathing that connects all life on the planet. And so the lesson from the way of water is that the power of nature is powered by this great metabolism. And the metabolism can be thought of as having 2 key components. One is the power of energy that flows through, the energy from the sun that powers the rising of clouds, the evaporation, the power of rain, and also is captured by biology as photosynthesis. And then the second part is the wild energies of the living world that channel that energy in different directions, in different ways. And here on Delos, these primeval powers and entities had names. The first one is Apollo. Energy, radiance, sunshine, the driving source of life on Earth. And the second name is Artemis, the wildness of nature. Just look at those wildflowers, the mixture of things out there. That's Artemis, the wild energies of the natural world, covering the ruins of this great city. And it's the combination of those that describe this wild energy. So we need to survive on this earth. We need to recognize that our culture, our civilization is built on the wild energies of a biosphere far older and more ancient than us. So these rocks, these plants, these rivers in the sky, they are not just the scenic backdrop of human civilization. They are the core metabolism on which our civilization depends. And to live sustainably on this planet, we need to work with Apollo. We need to use the energy of the sun, whether directly as solar or indirectly through wind or tide or waves, all of these things powered ultimately by Apollo. But we also need to sustain and flourish the wild energies of Artemis, to protect nature, to recover nature, to use nature, work with nature in a way to stabilize our planet and the climate challenge. Because ultimately, our civilization, our human societies, our technology, our economies are utterly, fundamentally dependent on the wild energies of the natural world. Because fundamentally, beyond all our technologies and distractions, we remain animal bodies of water and salt. We are creatures born of the living biosphere and utterly dependent on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yadvinder. A very nice sense of ourselves in these cycles and these processes, right? The breathing in the leaf in the Congo will be on my mind for a while. Jacob, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the play of scales that we have in this conversation here. Hello, everybody, and my deep thanks to the World Human Forum for convening us all here. Today, I'd like to introduce the idea of islands as laboratories for resource commons. In particular, what the Cyclades have to teach us about living well within limits and how we can safeguard and adapt those lessons for our future. We find ourselves here in this constellation of largely arid islands compared to the Amazon for sure, scattered across the central Aegean, forming this loose ring around Delos. For thousands of years, life on these rocks has been shaped by an abundance of certain resources and a scarcity of others. Over time, this scarcity bred ingenuity. Generations of islanders built their lives around what the islands could provide. Terraced fields, guarding lands against erosion, cisterns catching winter rain, ceramic vessels that turned local clay into containers for water, oil, and grain, a basic infrastructure of survival. The architectural historian Ioanna Theocharopoulou, writing about Sifnos in an essay commissioned last year by Archipelago Network, describes how every element of vernacular Cycladic life, the whitewashed walls, the dovecotes, the threshing floors, the pottery, emerges from a deep, embodied negotiation with finite resources. These are much more than the picturesque backdrops for tourists of today. They are working knowledge systems encoding centuries of trial, error, and optimization. That knowledge is now at risk. Climate change is intensifying drought. Mass tourism is dramatically increasing our seasonal water demands. Younger generations are leaving rural livelihoods. So the carriers of this knowledge, the fishermen, potters, farmers, and boat builders I've been working with these years, are aging and in many cases the last of their kind. This is the context in which our organization works. We're a research and documentation initiative founded some 6 years ago, building on my lifelong engagement with Greece and the Cyclades. Based in Syros, we work with a small team alongside a circle of local partners, advisors, and visiting researchers. Our mission is both concise and, to me, infinite, to research and foster the audiovisual heritage and knowledge of the Cyclades Islands through community-driven action. In these past 6 years, we've built a collection of heterogeneous multimedia, photographs, naval architectural plans, logbooks, songs, oral histories, field recordings, 3D models, and much more, spanning from the 1920s up until the present day, originating from 11 Cycladic islands and counting. These materials preserve fragile elements of Cycladic identity and culture, from traditional boat building, ethnobotany, seafaring, fishing, mining, quarrying, and more. Picking up the threads from my fellow speakers today and yesterday, I'd like to cast a brief light on two such practices. First, pottery craft in Sifnos, and then water management in Andros. Sifnos, which some of you may have been to, has produced pottery for millennia. Over the past 300 years, the craft developed prodigiously. The island's uniquely heat-resistant clay, its alluvial topography, and abundant sun all played a role in shaping these functional objects and in shaping a way of life around them. Our partnership with the Sifnos Potters Union began in 2022 upon their invitation. The result of our collaboration is a digital archive of historic photographs from the 13 active workshops on the island, short documentary films on each of them, and original contributions from historians and curators on the contemporary significance of these practices. Crucially, since publication of this work, and quite recently, Sipnian pottery has been inscribed in the UNESCO Register of Intangible Cultural Heritage, and a new craft school for pottery has been inaugurated on the island, providing formal training. In lieu of more analysis, I'd like to share 2 brief quotes from interviews conducted with these potters and now friends. So here's Frasescus Lemonis on the potter's relationship with the mountain. My translation. Potters are the reason why there is still greenery on the mountains here. Those cedar-like trees on the slopes above, we call them fida. They produce a red seed eaten by partridges. Rather than chopping up those trees, we would prune them and use the twigs and leaves as fuel. That's how we cultivated these trees over the years. Here, potterycraft brings with it a deepened understanding of the interdependence of us humans, plants, and animals, collapsing these discrete categories of nature and culture. Such knowledge, of which I encountered lots of, is passed down in myriad forms. With characteristic humor, Antonis Kalogiru, in his workshop in Kamares, relates a parable linking pottery with agriculture. I quote, "Summer is the potter's favorite season. The branches are dry and the clay dries quickly. There is a tale of a priest who had 2 sons, a potter and a shepherd. The shepherd said, 'Father, ask God for rain so that the sheep will eat.' The potter said, 'Father, ask God for sun so that the clay will dry.' And the priest said, 'My sons, one of you must suffer.'" Instead of viewing nature as an infinite resource, this brief tale positions limits as a necessary component of island life. Now on to Andros, the northernmost island of the Cyclades. One of its ancient names is Idrousa, the island of waters. Among these arid islands is an exception, mountainous green threaded with running streams. Travelers from the 15th century onwards, Bondelmonti in 1419, then Pirireis in the early 16th, singled out Andros precisely for this reason. Yet abundance on an island is never simply abundance. It is always something to be managed. Over several years, the Andros Research Center, a local nonprofit, has been mapping traditional practices of surface water management. I'd like to share a few of their findings. For the last several centuries, Andros has operated a sophisticated community-governed system for sharing its spring waters. The system had its own social class, the Neroulades, or Potistades, the waterers, made up of those who owned irrigated land. It has its own written instruments, the famous Nerohartia, the water papers, some dating to the 18th century, encoding agreements between users for who gets to use which water, when, and for how long. It has its own timekeeping technologies as well. In earlier centuries, the movement of the stars, the angle of sunlight on a particular church, a rock, a tree. Later, the mezzarola, a sort of local water clock, and eventually, of course, the modern watch. The unit of distribution is time, not volume. So you don't own a quantity of water, you own a duration during which the flow is yours. It also has its own jurisprudence. A legal study conducted locally found that elements of Byzantine Roman water law survived in Andros into the 19th century, and that the modern Greek civil code today still recognizes these arrangements. Andros water papers have been litigated in Greek courts in our lifetime, and the courts have ruled in favor of these traditional open channels on the grounds that they constitute a centuries-old and invaluable asset. What strikes me here is the conceptual architecture. Water in Andros is neither purely public nor purely private. It changes status as it moves. It is public when it flows free in the stream bed. It becomes private when it enters a property and is held there. When the surplus rejoins the stream, it becomes public again. In this precise sense, it is a commons, something held and governed by the rules that the community itself authors and maintains. So what we have here is a tested, multi-generational model of how a community can govern a critical natural resource without privatizing or nationalizing it. As we face our future of intensifying water stress, these are the kinds of hybrid knowledges I suggest we should pay closer attention to. I'll close with where this is all heading. 1 year ago at this very spot, a discussion with Dimitris Papasteriou, the Minister of Digital Governance, led us to co-initiate a new project, Digital Cyclades. The premise is this: we have over the past years built a heterogeneous archive of cultural data from 11 islands in the region. That data is now potentially useful for and potentially exploitable by emerging AI systems, so we have a choice about how it enters the world. Our response, developed with colleagues in the fields of machine learning, digital humanities, and IP law, is to build what we are calling an insular data trust. Working with open source tools, we'll convene datathons on 3 pilot islands where residents, students, and others come together to catalog the assets they provide, define narratives, and set what we call community-defined AI use policies. The model is inspired by international frameworks for data governance, adapted to these island contexts where the commons and custody of shared resources are already familiar things. This brings me to my last thought and to our gathering here today. In his book, Being a Human, British writer Charles Foster muses, the past is everywhere, nestling in our genes, our proteins, our bones, and our algorithms. We breathe it. And so I want to leave you with a question. What if superintelligence is already here, not only the nascent work of a tech company, but an essential distributed feature of this organism Earth we've been discussing? To me, it is held in the muscle memory of a potter, partly in the time-encoded contracts of the Andros water papers, partly in the fragile ecosystems we've spent these days discussing together. The Cyclades are not laboratories because they offer us off-the-shelf solutions for export. They are laboratories because they hold, in concentrated form, the question this gathering asks. How can we foster more convivial and livable futures through an attentiveness to the knowledges of the past and present? Our task, I think, perhaps, is simply to make sure we're still in a position to listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, so much. We have some time for discussion. Yeah, great, perfect. So while you're all thinking of your own brilliant questions, please don't hesitate. I saw a few pens moving, and the birds are flying in to offer their thoughts as well. I was struck by, brilliant talks, and thank you all so much, both for the sort of clarity and precision and the inspiration. I was struck by the sort of combination of descriptive terms, right? I mean, thinking about systems and processes and metabolisms, and then also, action words, right? Breathing, weathering, adapting, commoning, right? As sort of important ways that we, in a way, understand this relationship between knowledge production and sort of getting into gear, right? In these last 3 minutes. So I want to ask you, and I'll say phrase rather than word to give you a little liberty, but to offer us all an action word or an action phrase around this question of how water can help us to see ourselves more clearly, right? How it reflects the promise and challenge of coming together, specifically, I think, around questions of climate instability, but more broadly, these interconnected processes that we're focused on today. I hope that's not too much of a putting you on the spot, but a word or phrase that can help us think about how to move forward together. Jacob, since you have the mic, or please pass it off if you'd rather.
I would a word. Situated, I think, and I like the way Yadvinder placed us in relation to the places that we are talking about. I think it's very much something that runs through these practices, and yeah, well, I won't expand on it very much, but it's really understanding where we are in relation to these very big concepts and ideas.
Yeah, great. It's wonderful. Thank you. Situated here in this beautiful spot. Yeah, thanks.
I think global change, climate change has many dimensions, but water is the core dimension, the key, the most important. It's the arteries and veins of our planetary metabolism, of our human civilization.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate that, again, recollection or reflection back on the connection of our bodily systems to the systems in which we inhabit. Please, Niki, thank you.
If I have to say one word, it's life.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Can I open it up to the audience? Okay, we have a question. Can we run the microphone over? I can get it. No, I got it. Sit down. No, you're on the sit down.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a great session. All of you were really, truly inspiring. Actually, what came to my mind is that maybe it's a time to think about creating an Aegean One Health Observatory at this point, because what you all said leads to this direction, where we can combine the cultural memory that we usually do not take into account when we're talking about sustainable development models and that was mentioned by Jacob, but also the let's say, natural metabolism concept from Yadvinder, and also, of course, the nature mimicking, nature-inspired solutions to the current major problems. All of these come together to one unified observatory function. And I do think that the Cyclades in an island here really can be a great case. I wanted to say that as I'm with the National Research Foundation of Greece, we have suggested to the Ministry of Research, to the Ministry of Development, that in the Greek presidency, which is due in the second half of 2027, there would be an event on One Health and sustainable One Health. And that could be maybe, if we really work on it already from now, the opportunity to launch this kind of worldwide initiative. But that was I would like to hear your views on that.
I would like to say something about that and combine at the same time the culture, our future, and also the climate change at the same spot. The former years, people in Cyclades, mainly Cyclades, but in other places also, used to create man-made terraces in order to create a place to cultivate, because the islands are so slopey and it was not easy. It was hard work to do that, but they had made amazing man-made terraces. We call it in Greece pezoules. And it is part of the cultural landscape of Cyclades. But it is not only that. Through the climate change, it is not that we have less rainfalls. It is the pattern that changes. And one parameter of this pattern is that we have a big amount of rainfall in a very short time period, which means that we have a lot of runoff from upslope to downslope. In return, the nature has not enough time to absorb the water, to take it groundwater, and we are in an area where we do not have fresh water. So we need it. We need to slow down the runoff. Otherwise, all the water of the rainfall goes directly to the sea. Now, there is a big change in these Cycladic islands. There is a lot of touristic activities and so on. So people, they do not really cultivate. They do not need the terraces, the pezoules. They don't preserve them. There are some tries here and there, but mainly we have left it like that, which means that we have runoff erosion. We do not accumulate the water in as a groundwater. We have runoff erosion, which means we lose our soil. And if we lose our soil, each centimeter of soil needs about 1,000 years to create to have it back. So there is a cycle, because if you don't have soil, you cannot have vegetation. If you have not vegetation, you have more runoff. And if you have more runoff, then you don't have water. So it is a cycle that goes and goes again and again. So yes, I agree. It's an amazing idea to combine everything and to do something in this area, because the area speaks by itself. It is like it is calling us to do something like that.
Thank you so much. A beautiful response. Other thoughts on the question? Or
Very short. I can be very short.
you had another question over here, right?
I'll just say I'm a newcomer and a guest to the region, so I can't comment an expert, but my experience is that cultural heritage, ancestral heritage, those memories are an essential part anywhere in the world of thinking of an integrated approach to local and planetary health.
I agree. Thank you for the provocation. I think, as Sifnos potters have taught us, nature, you can't really separate nature and culture. I think nature, in the sense of soil, water, sun, becomes culture through these kinds of traditions. And some kind of observatory like that, I think it's, the Cyclades and the Aegean would be a perfect place to think about those in unison. And I have a lot of thoughts on them, but I won't go into them now because I think there's a lot more questions.
Great, thank you. And I think, again, this question of analysis and action, I think, is brought into that, right? Observatories that lead to deep-seated transformations that we're so desperate for. Yes, please. Let's. And please, if you could introduce yourself.
It's Constantin Barbias. We heard about the risks that may destroy our environment, the Earth, us as humans as well, and warnings given by excellent scientists like you, space scientists, geological scientists are giving the same warnings, and yet politicians, corporate people, and many of us in our own small scale don't listen to this warning. And I'm wondering what else could we do? What else we should do to stop or to have people listening? And one idea that I think came also from Alpha Mission Delos and the World Human Forum, and next year, from the Delft Festival, is that we should start feeling all ourselves as being a family. That's extremely important, because the only, a very powerful person, whether he's a politician, a geopolitical leader, a corporate person, the only one who cannot inflict a trauma, it's possibly his own members. So if these people could change, I don't know how, possibly psychologically, possibly, by other ways, possibly that's the way. And I'll just read something that, what is my, here. I'll just read just a quote by one of the founders of AI, sorry, just to find it. Geoffrey Hinton, often called the godfather of AI, he said that advanced AI systems may need maternal instincts, essentially comparing safe AI to a caring mother who protects rather than dominates her children. So if we manage, I believe if we manage to convey this message of a family, something I think that World Human Forum, and especially next year, possibly through Delphi, will try to project, this would be a way forwards. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Thoughts, comments, reflections? Nods in agreement?
Surely, I think that we all agree with you. And that's why we are here. And this is the message of this meeting, this event, that there is so much knowledge. It is not that easy to persuade the community, people to go a little bit outside the comfort zone. But events like that, missions like that, help us feel that we are not alone, we are together, and we can do more things. When I can do one thing, maybe you can do one thing, but the two of us, we cannot make two. We make more than two, 5, 10, I don't know. So yes, we're, let's say, a big family. I think this is why we're here, and I think this is, if we need to leave something out of the discussion today, is this, that we are all together, and we can do that.
Fabulous. Yeah, please.
I'll just give a small comment on hope. I know when you hear the climate story and everything, it can sound quite grim, and it is grim. It's, we have to take it seriously. There's no doubt about it. But I know when I talk about this to my students, sometimes they're all looking a bit depressed at the end. And so I always talk about hope. My definition of hope is clear-eyed pragmatism. So it's clear-eyed because you know the problem is real. You're not ignoring it and saying it's all going to be fine if we ignore it. But then you just get on and you find solutions. And the amazing thing about climate change is that we have solutions. That the technology is there. We can solve it. The main reasons we're not solving it is inertia in the system that takes time, and vested interests who want the old system to survive, and old energy systems, etc. Those are solvable problems. And so another quote from David Orr is, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. So it's a call to action rather than just a state that you feel.
Yeah, I've spent some time with my students exploring the difference between hope and optimism. right? I mean, optimism is sort of blind faith. It's bound to work out, right? But hope is something you cultivate, right? You have to wake up every morning and kind of work at it. Yeah, it's a practice. So that's very, very, very nicely understood. Jacob, did you want to? Yeah. I thought we had some other. Oh. Yeah. And then we're done. Okay, good. I just want to say quickly, I really loved the fact that you framed this in terms of a family, right? Because in families, when there's a conflict, generally speaking, we stay together, we resolve it, we work it out, right? I mean, it's a space of safety where that hope can really flourish. So I think it's an important framework. Yeah, please.
Yes, we talk about what we can do about the climate change and all that. When we have countries like China, the US, Brazil, without them maybe doing something about it, I don't know what kind of hope we have.
I was recently in China and in Brazil, working in both those countries. I try and avoid the US at the moment, and I see a lot of reasons for hope. China is transforming far faster than anybody imagined. I was in Shanghai. 60% of the cars are electric, and changing in the last few years. The air quality is better than London, and other solar panels. These things are happening. There's still much to do. I'm not going to be unthinking in my praise of what China's doing, but it's far better than the narrative we get. Brazil has committed to ending deforestation of the Amazon by 2030. There's lots of challenges around doing that, but the deforestation rates on the Amazon now are a fraction of what they were a decade ago. And again, there's lots of challenges. It can be reversals depending on government. There's a lot more good news bubbling under the global geopolitics than we often hear.
Yeah, great. As a recovering American myself, I was inspired by the meeting recently in Colombia, where my adopted home, the Netherlands, and many other countries were there to really start to think about ending fossil fuels, right? A sort of side meeting to some of the COPs that was willing to take on the challenge of how we can really start the drawdown. So just reaffirming, your point that there's some other stories to pay attention to. Other thoughts? Or?
Just to comment that in my lab that is working a lot with nature-based solutions, I'm receiving more than 5 students from China to learn about nature-based solutions. And I'm just a very small lab.
So hope, sorry.
We have both hope and optimism then.
Yeah, right. Maybe they have to go together. Thank you very much for these wonderful presentations and discussions and engaging with the group. And thank you all for your time and attention. Wonderful.